Hey, 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 welcome to the Cover One Fantasy Show. You are joining one of your three amigos, Greg Tompsett, alongside Anthony Prohaska and Rich Haynes. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. That hey, 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 it's like almost like a little fat Albert.
It is. Don't get me wrong. That's what's in my head as I'm saying it.
Okay, all right,
Nice.
all right.
I like the premeditation, getting everybody ready for the cartoon character mashup.
It is. That's right.
Going on. Very excited for tonight's episode. Very excited in general. We got real football stuff in the world. Training camps have opened. Greg, you and I are going to the Bills Open practice tomorrow. So we got real football going on. We're in the midst of fantasy football season really starting to pick up. Drafts are heating up. Players are getting injured and some are reporting, and there's different things going on and all these things. So I'm a happy camper right now.
Yeah, we'll maybe get into a little bit of that tonight. Tonight's show is going to be on wide receiver tiers and bold predictions, along with which cartoon characters each of our receivers are as we go. But first, let's talk about our sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you're checking out our friends at Underdog Fantasy. You can download the app, use the promo code Cover1, be able to get yourself $25 free to be able to have some fun, come and compete against us, show how far superior you are to our abilities, and we actually even got one rolling here in a private league with our guests for tonight. And Rich, I believe you're even on the clock. What are you thinking about doing as you're getting on the clock?
Yeah, I actually am on the clock, so I'm at the turn here. Picks 412 and 5-1 here on the old Underdog app. So, my roster as it sits right now is Christian McCaffrey at 1-1, CeeDee Lamb I got, at the end of round 2, which I really like. I'm pumped about him this year. Yeah. And then I went with Joe Mixon at the top of round 3. And if you've, listened to our running back tier show last week, you know that I'm a pretty big fan of him and his, I think his usage rate probably this year is going to be very nice in Cincinnati's offense. So I'm kind of stuck right now. I'm going to try to make this pick, sometime tonight, probably on air, but I'll just give everyone a little taste of what I'm thinking about here. So it's you start 3 wide receivers, you start 2 running backs, a tight end, quarterback. It's half PPR. So usually I love my wide receivers, but this is weird for me to not have a bunch already, even though we're only through 3 rounds. But we have Michael Thomas, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Galladay, Odell, Chase Claypool, Robbie Anderson. Those are kind of a flavor of some of the wide receivers left. Running backs, Mike Davis, Javonte Williams, Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, and then tight ends, Mark Andrews, T.J. Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert. That's kind of where we're at. Quarterbacks, a lot of quarterbacks left. So,
take Drew Brees.
Probably going to take Drew Brees. But I'm probably going to try to grab at least one wideout, although I don't honestly love many of them. So I'm gonna contemplate it as we talk tonight.
Oof, decisions.
Well, one of the best places to be able to get advice nowadays is over at Establish the Run. So without further ado, our guest tonight, the director of analytics at Establish the Run, Mike Leone. How we doing?
I'm doing well. Pretty pumped to be on the show. Getting the local Buffalo Bills coverage here from Cover One. So, and Greg, we've chatted on Twitter a bunch, but first time we're doing something together. Yeah. So this is fun.
Yeah, welcome, man. I'm really looking forward to it. And I know before we dive in, obviously you've been around this space for a while, but I think a lot of people are excited going over, obviously with names that people know with Adam and the guys over at Establish the Run. How did that turn out? How did you get into working with Evan and the guys over there?
Yeah, I've been doing fantasy since 2013 full time, kind of like when DFS first started and got huge, DraftKings, FanDuel, and I was, with my previous company doing a lot of baseball, basketball, football year round. It was quite the big grind. So when I saw ETR post the director of analytics position, applied to that. It's something I've been working on a lot is, doing projections work, kind of improving some of my computer programming stuff on the back end, but still doing the content side of things. So it's been awesome to work with Adam Levitan and Evan Silva. And it's like a best of both worlds. I get to best with the data on the back end, but I get to do fun shows like this and still do a lot of content and focus mostly on football too, which is nice.
Football's so much better than all the rest of the sports.
Dude, baseball burns you out, every day for 6 months. It's a grind. I used to love it so much, and now I'm like, I don't even know who's in first in the divisions or anything.
I'm in one, and it's going okay enough that I have to pay attention, and I added and dropped 3 different guys the last 2 days because I thought I had a closer, and then that guy got traded, and then another guy got moved. It was miserable. It's making me crazy.
Trade deadline time.
So we're going to take the same approach that we have the last couple weeks here. Folks that have been listening, going through how we did quarterback tiers, how we did running back tiers. We're going to go through wide receivers tonight. So we're going to let Mike kind of lead the way, talk through how we approach wide receivers in this format. We'll talk about mostly PPR. That's becoming more of the standard. But if we have guys that we have questions on. Half PPR is really starting to pick up a little bit more in a lot of different formats. We talked about Underdog, and we're doing a league together there, and a lot of the approaches there. A lot of people paying attention to Scott Fishbowl that just wrapped up a lot of drafts, going with their half PPR and point per first down structure. So maybe a couple different things come there. But if we don't say otherwise, most people can assume that we're talking about PPR formats. So before we dive into specific players, as someone that actually builds, the different projections and models yourself, how much do you get into literally letting the board go one by one and where the projections rank versus doing groupings or tiers? How do you approach that in your home drafts or the ones that you really care about?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely start with the projections. That's my bread and butter. But when you're doing the projections, you kind of have a base projection for a player, based on, the play volume you expect for the team, how much they're going to throw, what target share you expect for a guy, and, their historical efficiency numbers. So that kind of like gives me a base start, but I still want to layer in just like how talented, is this player. Stephon Diggs is a good example from last year where if you solely looked at the context, you probably were too low on Stephon Diggs last year. I know that kind of happened to me early in the offseason. And then one of my friends, Ben Gretsch, who I do a lot of content with, talking with him, I moved him up because it's like, well, Stephon Diggs is just a really good receiver. He can earn a super high target share. So you want to layer in those upside cases. But after that spits out, I do end up, kind of, I guess, doing the tier-based drafting just naturally, off of my projections. I feel like I get these natural pockets of tiers. And as we go through them, you'll see it works out kind of like where I have receivers I would take in round 1, receivers I would take in round 2, and then, rounds 3 to 4 are grouped together. So it works out a little bit naturally. And I try not to be overly picky, within the receivers in a specific tier. I'm somewhat a nihilist drafter where I'll take anybody at the right ADP at the right price tag.
So, Anthony, as we go into it here, I know, Rich has talked a lot about his approach, oftentimes starting wide receiver, and he's been on that train for a decade, going back further. It's obviously caught up and is more common now. What has your approach been in some of those things with, obviously now the depth of wide receiver gets a little bit different? How have you approached some of that, Anthony?
I think it's a really good question to think about because, and as we're going to get into tonight, like even when I was going through and doing my tiers, I started really looking at it, and granted, I'd done this in preparation for some of the drafts that I've done already this offseason, including the one Dynasty League we're in together. But I really was just like, as I was putting my tier 3 together and I was just looking at it, I was like, I'm really comfortable with a lot of these guys being like arguably my wide receiver 1. And the wide receiver grouping, as you mentioned, is so deep. And as I mentioned on the show, I am traditionally, especially in a redraft league, I am traditionally first 5, even first 6 picks, you're going to get usually running backs and wide receivers. For me, some sort of combination, much to what, Mike mentioned. I'm really, whatever value is there, I'm not married to, well, I need to come away with 2 running backs in the first, whatever. Like, I'm very much like, oh, this guy is still there. The value is great. Boom, I'm going to take that guy. But it's an interesting thing to mention because, we'll see how many tiers we get through tonight, but there's a lot of quality, even when you're looking into like some of the tier 4 guys, like the upside and the potential in tandem combination with some of the high floors that a lot of these guys have. It's a really interesting wide receiver grouping, and it's not boom or bust at the top. You can get quality value in rounds 3, 4, 5, and look at wide receiver 1s, wide receivers 2 towards, those rounds and not have to go super early. So it's an intriguing group.
So, Rich, kind of along the same line, someone who's leaned that way for so long, has the increased pass happiness of the league and the depth at wide receiver changed that at all, or does it make it even more valuable?
No, I do think it's so. I think it's changed that a little bit, and I think it was a great strategy, as you mentioned, years ago because no one was doing it. So I'm big on trying to figure out and kind of go away from what everyone is doing. So when everyone was going running back, depending on where your draft position fell, of course, I wanted to try to grab value, especially if I was on the, end of round 1, early round 2. I'm going to go wide out and get 2 top players there, especially once PPR, really came into, a popularity 8 years ago or so. So, I was just trying to do something different, and it worked because I was getting an advantage at that position. So now, it is a little bit different when you do have a deeper group of wide receivers. The NFL is more pass happy, and you have so few running backs that are the bell cow. It's a lot different situation. So I do think it's a little more important to grab at least one running back. I know I talked about on that previous episodes. I now kind of go with, I don't know that I need 2 running backs, but I definitely want 1 now, and then I'll follow it up with a number of wide receiver, options in a PPR league. So that's what I kind of look at. And one other strategy I do, especially at wide receiver, I like to try to stay I don't want to grab wide receivers coming on the downside. So if 29, 30-year-old wide receivers that, are getting a little stale, I don't really like to jump on the stale wide receiver train unless, to Mike's point, the ADP is just in a situation where it's like, okay, now it's good value. I'm trying to get those guys on the upswing, the 23, 24-year-old wide receivers that are going to come into their own, even in redraft, because I'm not a big fan of going with the stale guys or the guys that have changed teams, because as we talked about in past episodes as well, free agency tends to not be so kind to wide receivers from a fantasy perspective in a lot of cases. So we'll get into that more as we go into the tiers. I'll have some examples of that.
Yeah, the flip side of that coin, there's a reason the example Mike used for Diggs, there was a reason people were down on him. Is there wasn't a lot of precedent of people switching teams and leading the league in every statistical catery.
Especially because he was going to go to a team with a horrible quarterback who wasn't going to amount to anything, and he was going to hate it.
I was on that train, yeah.
I have to keep my mouth shut here at this point in the conversation.
No,
there's too many receipts out there. It's too easy to find.
They're out there, yeah. For sure.
But
I'm a Browns fan though, so I was allowed to not like Josh Allen.
That's fair. That is fair.
Without further ado, Mike, kick us off for us. Let us know what is your tier 1 and how many guys do you put in that upper group before you start to draw the first line?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty wide receiver heavy drafter early. I like to, kind of pepper the board with receivers, especially if you're in a 3 wide receiver league like Underdog. As deep as it seems, I want a wide receiver in my flex. They outscore running backs kind of a lot in the flex. So in order to do that, I need to start taking them early. I have 3 receivers I would take in round 1, I think, and that's my tier 1. Devante Adams, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, in that order is my tier 1.
Oh.
So I'll chime in from that standpoint. I think obviously the Rodgers news reconfirmed that there was actually a little window there where he was going even 4th or 5th in some places because we had no idea if it was Jordan Love or what it was. So if anybody that got that little window where you could get Adams in the mid to late 2nd, God bless you, that was a nice little pocket. I think now coming back and all the last dance postings and everything, man, I think that the target share is just so unbelievable. And then
it's insane.
Beyond anybody else, no other wide receiver is even close in the red zone. Like that is just, it's so rare to have somebody that gets so many touches.
As an Aaron Jones owner last year, I keep saying it, like the goal line offense being passed to Devante Adams relentlessly still haunts me.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I think I have the same group. So, I think I like the upside and the huge weak potential for Tyreek Hill, but the floor for Diggs and Adams is so nice. Just 6-7 catches, 70, 80 yards minimum every single week is just such a good floor. Any big differences for you guys?
I had 5 in my tier 1 who but 3 of them, you mentioned 3 of them. So I have Diggs number 1, Adams 2. I have DK Metcalf actually number 3, even though I know Seattle's not exactly a super pass happy offense. So that's, I can get it, but I'm a big DK fan. And then I have Hill and Nuke, from Arizona. They're all in kind of my tier 1. And I feel like if I get any of those guys, I'm going to be happy. Although certainly Diggs and Adams, for me are almost like 1A if I had to separate some even in that initial tier. But any of those guys for me are at the top of the mountain. And one comment I want to play off of Mike for a second there, he mentioned, now we kind of said, hey, wide receivers is deep. But at the same time, if you don't grab a couple guys early, it does tend to thin out. And actually the draft we're in right now on Underdog, that's a perfect example of that. I went running back, wide receiver, and I went Mixon instead of Terry McLaurin, who that was my choice. I was like almost took Terry McLaurin, then you know what? I'm going to go Mixon here. And I kind of wish now I went McLaurin because now I'm staring at, again, I mentioned earlier, Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Kenny Galladay. Like, I'm not super excited about that right now, at the end of the 4th round, to be honest. So.
Very fair.
That's a very wide receiver heavy room for sure. And I don't mind Diggs 1 overall either, because the one edge the Bills have over the Packers is the Bills are going to air it out all season long. Dable has not backed off, what they did last year. They're going to do exactly what they're going to do. And it's really a unique situation to get a guy who can get a 30% target share, is legitimately super talented, top 5 receiver in the league, and the team's just going to air it out. We're going to be I think the Bills were 1st or 2nd in pass rate over expectation last season. No reason to expect that to change this year.
And I love Diggs from that same standpoint. For me, I think Diggs is number 1 because I think his floor is just so high because of his target share, because he runs all sorts of routes. He'll get you the first down routes. He'll get you some of the short bubble screens. He'll hit the deep ball in here. There, he kind of does. He does everything. Runs routes really crisp. From a crisp perspective. And again, just he's projected for 118 receptions on the projections. I'm taking a look at right now. You're just not going to have too many dud games like you might have with a Tyreek Hill, who might throw up a 3 for 30 and not have that score. And you're kind of like, well, crap, I'm screwed this week. So for me, Diggs kind of does it all. So to throw the first cartoon reference in, although to be honest, I'm not sure I'm going to do so well at this one compared to wrestling. American Dad came to mind, and Roger from American Dad, the alien that lives upstairs. He changes outfits. He does whatever he wants. He's kind of, he schemes. He's always getting people in trouble, but he does it really well. He can change personalities all over the place. So that's kind of like Diggs, who can do all these different things for the Bills to be really successful. So for me, when I watch American Dad, I really like Roger. So
the only one I had in that tier was Devante Adams, where a lot of people, they just did a post recently that went around of favorite cartoons, and one of them was the Batman animated series, and it's yeah, it's awesome, but it's one dude, that's the whole thing, and that's Devante Adams. It's one guy, and he's awesome, but he's the whole show, he's the whole deal, and everything that he's the only one that you get. So I can respect it.
Randall Cobb's not going to be is that not?
he might be the Joker that.
We'll talk about him later in tier 17.
Oh, so mean. Poor Randall Cobb.
Mike, and I like the way you've approached this, and guys you'd consider round 1. So who are the guys you would consider round 2?
Yeah, so I kind of have a 2A and a 2B. I'd say 2A, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, right at that 1-2 turn. I'm comfortable taking them. And then 2B, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, and Justin Jefferson.
Okay.
So these are all guys I'm willing to take at round 2.
So Calvin Ridley is a really interesting one, because I think some in, a lot of football coach speak ideas oh man, they lost Julio, so it's a lot of attention on him now. Is he going to be able to be that number 1 guy? If you look at the games last year when Julio was out in this stretch, he carried the mantle just fine. And that, I don't hate it that the Falcons defense isn't going to be anything special. And I like Pitts. I think he's going to be good, but it's not like they have a whole lot else there. Russell Gage and,
Mike Davis's thighs.
Mike Davis's thighs might go out for a route.
Olamide, Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus.
I'm not.
I think I have him in a dynasty league somewhere. So, Mike, do you think that there's any concern with Ridley truly stepping into that number 1 role?
Not really. I mean, you look at the splits without Julio Jones. He's played 8 games. He's averaged 7 catches for 107 yards and 0.4 touchdowns. That's 20 PPR points. And there's, I think, a little more volatility, but it still boosts, his range of outcomes higher because volume's king in fantasy. And then drafting Kyle Pitts too. I feel like it's the best of both worlds, where they draft this unique talent in Kyle Pitts, so that helps them not completely zone in on Calvin Ridley. He gets a little bit of help, but it's going to be less competition for targets than when Julio Jones was there. So it's the best of both worlds. You're playing in a dome at least 8 times a year with a capable quarterback, a defense that stinks, a team that's going to throw a lot, an offense or a coach that was the offensive coordinator of the Titans, super efficient offense they had coming over. So I feel pretty safe about it. I think he's going to ascend here. And I'm not too worried about the loss of Julio hurting him.
So flip that around the other direction. Neither of you guys seem scared off of DK by Julio going to Tennessee, run heavy offense, maybe eating into some targets. You both feel pretty good about DK still eating it at not the
AJB.
exact same rate, but
AJ Brown.
Yeah, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
AJ Brown in that same group.
Yeah, I feel great about AJ Brown. I mean, last year Corey Davis was a monster, and it didn't really slow. And obviously Julio Jones is more talented than Corey Davis. Probably, certainly more competition for targets. But I think Corey Davis was like 5th in the NFL in yards per route run. But just the way that offense runs, Tannehill has been stupid efficient the last 2 years, and AJ Brown I think is just a special talent. This is one where I'm trying not to get overly caught up on the volume. It is somewhat a run-heavy team, but he can win in so many ways. He can beat you vertically down the field. He can take a slant to the house. He's just supremely talented, kind of a unicorn-type guy in A.J. Brown. And I do think there's a chance they throw more. If anything were to ever happen to Derrick Henry, we could see the identity of this offense switch a lot. And then all of a sudden that pass volume we're worried about, we see A.J. Brown getting more targets than we expected with his talent, and everyone's like, oh, why did we let him slip into the 3rd round? So I just feel super confident with the efficiency and the talent, and we'll let the volume sort itself out there.
Anthony, any guys here in that second group that you differed from or had ranked significantly differently?
No, pretty much along the same lines. I considered, my tier 1 was the same as Mike's. Hill, Adams, and Diggs. I think those 3 are much like, I think Christian McCaffrey is like almost in a tier by himself. I think those 3 are in a tier by themselves. But then in tier 2, you can make a case for some of these guys being put into that tier 1. And I really like tier 2. I mean, granted, if you can get Devante Adams or Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill, that's fantastic. But I love the idea of getting like a true RB1 in round 1 and then coming back in round 2 and grabbing any of these tier 2 guys as your wide receiver 1. I love the points that Mike made about Calvin Ridley. I love the fact that you're going to get half of his games in a dome, combined with the fact that he's also got to play the Saints. That's another game in a dome on a team with a horrible defense, with the volume that he's going to get. Volume is king. And then also, like what Mike mentioned about Stephon Diggs and his buddy telling him about how good Diggs is, Calvin Ridley is very good at football. His route running, his understanding of coverage and how to read defenses, combined with his hands and his athleticism, just a really good player. And then, talking about the rest of that grouping, I really like Justin Jefferson. My 2 favorites, I think, out of tier 2 are DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. Just their physical dominance as monsters of, they look like the Monstars from the original Space Jam, but now they've added more polish. And that's not my cartoon comparison for them.
It's a pretty good one,
I should have gone with that.
Pretty good one.
Don't say it's not. That was
excellent. No, I got ones that I like more. DK Metcalf, so Calvin Johnson was Megatron for obvious reasons. DK Metcalf is also a monster built like that in a way, and also kind of machine-like, but he can't be, Decepticon. He has to be on the other side. So I gave DK Metcalf Optimus Prime a little bit for that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and then AJ Brown, the way he plays, I gave him Popeye because of his strength and his ability to just hulk up and just do, if he was, wrestling, maybe a little Hulk Hogan action or maybe like some Ultimate Warrior piece. But it's interesting we talk about like the floor and the ceiling aspect, and then talking about Tennessee's offense, which is obviously so run heavy. AJ Brown for me has this weird floor, because I feel like even if he gets like 3 catches, he's going to turn those 3 catches into like 70 or 80 yards because he's going to catch something and just shake off everyone and house it, much like he did in his rookie year. He just kept having weeks where he'd only have like 4 catches, but it'd be like for 90-something yards and like a 52-yard touchdown. You just keep being like, he's not going to sustain that. And he kept doing it down the stretch his entire rookie year. I really like him a lot as well, but especially in redrafts this year, if you're coming away with one of the top tier guys, that's awesome. But I really like this tier 2 as having guys that can be your wide receiver 1. I'd also consider putting Terry McLaurin. I have him at the top of my tier 3, but I'd consider putting Terry McLaurin into tier 2 here, which I also like.
So, Mr. Leone, but before we go into tier 3, where did you have Michael Thomas pre-injury, and how do you handle him in, say, redraft leagues with now the news that he might miss 6, maybe even half the season?
Yeah, I had him in this 2B tier, before tier 3. Just the ability to earn so many targets. I was trying not to overthink the quarterback situation. And now I have him. I did a draft last night where there was a certain segment of receivers that went, and he went in round 7. And this was a draft that has like an overall contest. It was a little bit different. I took the swing for the fences and took Michael Thomas, I think the end of the 7th in that. But even in a redraft league, I think the hope is he comes back week 7 after their week 6 bye. And you start reaching a point in the draft where some of the younger upside guys are gone, like, Brandon Ayuk's gone, Chase Claypool is gone. And when those guys are gone, at that point, I just like to take this swing on Michael Thomas. The upside to me is worth it right now.
Well, I said by ADP there, you're talking Devontae Smith, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Boyd, Robbie Anderson, those kind of guys where a half a season or 10 games of Michael Thomas might be more valuable than a full season of a guy like that.
Yeah, and it depends on your team too. Can you afford to just stash him on your bench? Where in this draft I was in, we were able to get him as like our wide receiver 5. We don't need him to contribute right away. We're just hoping to lay down the hammer at the end of the season. So
cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely see that perspective for sure. Although, for me, I'll differ a little bit. I try to stay away from injury guys. I don't even consider them, honestly. If they're going to miss 6 weeks, that sometimes turns into 7 and then 8 and then 9. We've seen that time and time again where all of a sudden, they don't get taken off the PUP list. And it's like, and if you think about it from a fantasy football perspective, even with the added, week onto this season, if you're waiting for, Michael Thomas to come back, and granted, Mike, to your point, you're certainly not counting on him, to be your wide receiver 1. I get that, but if you're counting on him to produce, and all of a sudden it's not until week 9, and he probably doesn't play the whole game, or I just stay away and let somebody else deal with that issue. I get it in best ball for sure. Like, hey, if it's to your point, if it's round 7, okay, fine, best ball, because maybe you can come. I don't have to worry about it. He's going to just come and maybe produce at some point down the road, but.
Yeah, heck, I lived it last year. I traded for him in 2 different leagues, assuming for that second half swing and that, hey, I can afford this. I can make a playoff run here. And then he okey-doked everybody and, he completely sank me in the one league.
I do want to make one comment on tier 2 that I like from Anthony's perspective. My tier 2, I kind of named my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tier because I have 4 in them, and it was Justin Jefferson, Ridley, Lamb, and an AJ Brown. But I agree with Jefferson and Lamb specifically. I just love their upside and their offenses so much that I would probably pass on like a Hill, for example, and take that running back at the end of round 1 to try to grab a Lamb instead, just because I just think that he's going to do really well in that Dallas offense this year with Dak, as long as Dak can stay healthy. And Jefferson too, like Kirk Cousins is so underrated as a quarterback, at least from a fantasy perspective. That dude throws 4,000 yards all the time. I mean, Jefferson's going to get the volume, and I just love. He came out. I'm so mad last year. I had him in an auction league, and I dropped him after the first week for no apparent reason. And I should be keeping him right now, and I'm just like going to blow my head off. I can't even remember why I dropped him too, but that's a story I got to tell some other time. I have to go figure out why I did that. But Justin Jefferson, I love, and I love, Anthony, your point of, hey, some of those guys have so much upside. It's like, all right, maybe even me with my love for wide receivers, let's pass on one and just grab one of them in round 2.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, lead us off into your third tier.
CeeDee Lamb, 3A. I'd go CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin. Then I didn't really know if I should make this a third and fourth tier, but I said like 3B then is a pretty big grouping of guys with the Rams guys, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett in there, the Bucks guys, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. And then some young guys I think still have some really strong upside that maybe it's a little early, but they're worth betting on because we could be drafting them in round 2 next year, in Jamar Chase and DJ Moore.
So this is the area where ideally you're plucking 2 or 3 of these guys, being able to get, and really add in a nice chunk. I think that there's a really natural shift from exciting and valuable running backs to now, hey, it's super easy to just snag a couple of these guys, rounds 3, 4, 5. It's a really healthy range to be able to grab a good chunk of these guys. When I looked at it, I kind of previewed beforehand that the Animaniacs was one of my favorite cartoons. Like when I got home from school, I would watch Animaniacs, and it's like 3 young, little characters all together, and that's the Bengals trio for me.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Jamar Chase,
Yep.
and you don't really know, like, each of them would have their lead roles and things like that. You don't know Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, even Tyler Boyd, kind of nice value where you can get him. And, and our quarterback show, we all talked about how much we like the upside of Joe Burrow, and you hear the stories of him working with Jordan Palmer and increased his velocity from like 46, 47 miles an hour to 54 and like a ton more power. And that if he starts to, if he connects that, the one draw on him was, well, we don't know if the arm strength is special. He did a ton of that work with, he was always up on his toes, and now he's flat-footed and really pushing off from his heel and delivering through and getting his hip through, and all the exact same stuff Jordan Palmer did with Josh Allen. If he all of a sudden adds arm strength to the arsenal with what he already had with the timing and the, just the accuracy to it, man, it could be special. And I don't think the Bengals defense is going to be all that good. No. So when the same idea, you talk about everybody loves Stafford. Well, we're not really seeing it with Kupp and Woods and the receiver end of things. I don't think we're really seeing it with the Bengals receivers. I think there's a nice pocket of value there with the Rams set and with the Bengals set that you can get. Someone's going to matter out of those groups, and they're all going in that like wide receiver 3-ish tier that somebody's going to batter out of those groups for it. Rich, any favorites out of those? Here you also get the duo and trio for Tampa Bay, where you have the two top end guys and maybe some straggling from Antonio Brown. How do you handle groups where there's not a defined number one?
Yeah, I mean, we actually talked about it a little bit about specific to Tampa Bay, that Antonio Brown, he gets, everyone loves Godwin and Evans, but Antonio Brown towards the end of last year was getting just as many targets as the other two. And obviously he's going, 7 rounds, 6 rounds later a lot of times than those two stars. So, I probably, I don't think I would for that particular group. I don't know that I'm going to be the first one like to grab Evans or Godwin. I would probably let somebody else take one of them, and if the other one falls to me in a certain situation, I may grab them. I actually like the upside of those Bengals wide receivers that you just mentioned, especially T. Higgins. I liked him a lot last year, and I just think that Jamar Chase is going to get a lot of that, a lot of the excitement because he's the rookie and he's certainly going to get some looks. But I think T developed something a little bit with Burrow before he went down last year. And, I think he could have a sneaky, nice season. Boyd gives that veteran presence. So I like all of those guys as well. I have them in my tier 4. As far as the Bengals wide receivers go, I have Godwin and I have Evans in my tier 3, along with Mclaren and some of the other guys that Mike mentioned. My tier 3 is actually, it's pretty veteran laden, which is interesting. Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, Robert Woods, Mari Cooper, not 32 or, but, kind of they've been in the league for a minute. They're established, other than Mclaren, who I like, a lot, but I'm not as high on Fitzpatrick as Anthony is in Washington.
So, Anthony, how do you handle where you have groups like that with a glut of guys at the same position, all kind of going in the same area? Do you ever avoid the grouping, or do you even ever take more than one of them when you see guys like this? If the ADP is unavoidable, and hey, you already have Amari Cooper, but CeeDee Lamb, or you already have CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper falls more than you think he should, would you pass on that or feel uncomfortable having 2 in 1 offense?
I usually stay away from I'm okay with like a quarterback wide receiver stack. I'm okay with that, but I tend to stay away from 2 guys on the same team at the same position. Like, again, if you're talking like Woods and Kupp or Cooper and Lamb, whatever. But to your point, I think it depends on how your draft falls and how your team is already constructed. And if you're sitting there and it's like round, I don't know, 6 or 7 or even 5, and you took CeeDee Lamb in round 2. If you're rich and you took CeeDee Lamb in round 2, and then you took Joe Mixon in round 3, and if you were coming back now and Amari Cooper was still there, I'd be like, oh, well, I mean, like the volume or things like that, like depending on what you have going on there. Because again, it's especially for you got to take everything into consideration for that offense, because granted they're on the same team, but if someone on that team is going to put up or is going to get the volume that a wide receiver 1 on another team is going to get, combined with the talent and the explosiveness, I mean, I don't think you could really shy away from it. At the end of the day, value is value. I traditionally stay away from it, but if the conditions are right, I could be very tempted to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Here, I just want to bring this one comment up from Adam, which I thought was interesting. There's nothing wrong with that. They score the same regardless. And I think to an extent that's true. I think we kind of get tricked sometimes, like, oh, I don't want to have two players from the same team on my wide receiver group. The one thing that does scare me a little bit about that is the boom or bust potential there. So if you have Cooper and Lamb, for example, and for whatever reason the Cowboys just have an off game, you're probably screwed that week because you're going to have two guys that probably aren't going to produce. So that's the thing that, to me, I tend to stay away from it. But that's an interesting point by Adam. I think it might be a little more mental than what actually occurs. From I'd be interested to see about that.
That's
Have
exactly
you ever
what
dove into that, Mike?
I think I get a little worried about it with more the situation in Tampa with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, where Brady will spread targets around, and I get a little concerned the floor drops out on one of the other guys. Dallas situation, this might just be Dallas specifically, but I don't mind the boom or bust nature. That correlation to me is kind of a good thing because most of your leagues are top heavy. If Dak sets the world on fire and has an awesome year, both of these guys are probably going to pay off their ADP, one of them in a really big way. I think they're going to run so many plays per game. They did it last year. They're fast-paced. They're up-tempo. Dak, we saw it the first 5 games before Dak got hurt. It's two really talented receivers. So I'm not too concerned about it here. And I also think there's a chance we see an even higher target share from these guys. I look at last year, Lamb, Cooper, and Gallup were about 56% target share combined, which is fine. It's decent, but there's other offenses like the Panthers last year that supported 3 top 24 receivers when their quarterback threw only like 15 touchdowns because they combined for 66% target share. So if we see Dallas condense and Dak play a fully healthy year, and I'm just really excited about the Cowboys offense. I think there's some nuclear outcomes for either Lamb or Cooper. One of them goes nuts. The other one hopefully is just fine enough, and you're pretty happy.
And I think that Dallas one is the exception. Like that offensive potential and that explosiveness can really overcome a lot of those kind of like angsty feelings and worries. And I really like what Rich pointed out. That's some of like the trepidation I have as well. Like I'm afraid, what if the quarterback gets hurt, or if because fantasy at the end of the day is still like a week to week thing. And you don't want to take any losses. So it's a week-to-week game. And what happens if the quarterback goes down? Or again, if you have the Buccaneers wide receivers, Tampa Bay gets hit with crazy rain and weather all the time. And all of a sudden you got like a couple games that are rain and washed out, or just little weird oddities that have happened like that. But if you got a situation like Dallas, I think that's an exception. Much like one of my favorite years when I had Kamara in his rookie year, I drafted him because I liked him, but I also had taken Mark Ingram earlier. And I thought, well, okay, Kamara could take some snaps, or if Ingram goes down, lo and behold, they ended up both being startable. But I think those are kind of one-off situations, much like the situation before that, the year before, Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman were both very startable in the Atlanta Falcons backfield. And I think sometimes that can work out, and you've got those guys that just boom. I think Dallas has that type of potential this year, given Dak, their offense, the lack of a defense, playing in a dome, the division they play. Dallas has a lot of good things working in that favor to double dip at that position.
So all those sets, I've actually found myself inventing like handcuff wide receivers in my head. I end up taking the third guy in a bunch of those offenses. I have a bunch of Tyler Boyd. I have a bunch of Michael Gallup. I have a bunch of Antonio Brown, because if any of those top end guys go, you get them so cheap that, hey, they're almost like that Kareem Hunt kind of handcuff where hey, you have week-to-week value already. You can play them. They're playable. But if something happens to the guy in front of them, you now have not a league winner, but you have an impactful player, but you get flex play out of him anyway. So like anything I can find for good value in those crazy offenses, I keep snagging different guys, and I can't decide if I think I really keep liking Trevor Lawrence more and more the more I keep looking at
We've
stuff.
got Tim Tebow to throw to.
And obviously, and the non-Tebow, different targets that are available. Marvin Jones is like free half the time, and coming in, he already knows that offense. I like Chark and Chenault's upside more, but man, he's really cheap. It just stuff like that. I keep finding
that's
the tail end of those nice offenses.
That's a really good point, though, because I think sometimes we can be too focused on what things look like exactly day one. And we know NFL season, chaos reigns, guys are going to get hurt, guys are going to break out, all sorts of things. And to draft talented receivers like Tyler Boyd, where they're good as they are, but there's this hidden value, and Jamar Chase goes down. Now the target share that we were so concerned about goes from, a slight negative to a huge positive. And then that was kind of the thing with the Diggs example at the beginning of the show last year, where it's like he's coming in, John Brown, Cole Beasley already there. We're worried he's not going to see a big enough target share, but maybe he's just awesome and just an alpha and takes it over. So I do like those types of picks where you can kind of see the routes to, if things break a certain way, there's a little bit of like asymmetric upside with guys like that.
So it kind of in the final chunk here, we went through your core tiers, through the guys that you had there. Let's go around it. Maybe some guys you seem to like later on that are good dart throws that you see some upside in or are worth taking a shot at. Some guys later on. I'll bring an example. We kind of talked about it in that I don't think the different pieces connect that you talked at the opening about how pass happy the Bills are, how high upside the different, consistency is, and why it makes Stephon Diggs there. And Stephon Diggs' target share obviously makes it different for the other guys. I kind of think there's a window for Emmanuel Sanders to matter here in what John Brown was doing previously. And then when he got hurt, it kind of got spread around. You had the really high touchdown rate for Gabe Davis that I don't know if that's sustainable. The target share went up for Cole Beasley. I don't know if that's exactly what they would have intended if John Brown had stayed healthy. And I think Emmanuel Sanders is a slight upgrade to him and how they want to run the offense. I almost think there's a sneaky path for that. Do you think there's another mouth that can be startable from that Bills offense?
I think they can all be startable. An underdog, I've been doing drafts. I've been trying to stay ahead of market on all three of them and kind of rotate. And it seems like Manny Sanders has been the best value because he's gone the latest and is actually probably the best bet of the three. I know Joe Buscaglia has been on that from the get-go. You guys like Manny Sanders and his fit for the Bills. And to your point, because the Bills are a high-powered offense that's just going to throw no matter the situation, they're going to play four receivers. I think they might rotate receivers a decent bit this year, given how banged up they ended up the end of last year at wide receiver. There's value in all three of them as is. Something happens to Diggs, God forbid. Like these are kind of league winners, assuming this, the offense is obviously going to take a big step back, but there's also going to be a ton of volume and they're not going to totally change their identity. I don't think they're not going to become a run heavy team. So I like those guys. I absolutely love the Bengals guys. I know we hit on them already, but T Higgins was kind of a boomer bust prospect who hit, and once he hits, now you're in year two. No AJ Green. You mentioned the Burrow stuff. I like Boyd. That's a team, too, that they ran the 11 weeks that Burrow was quarterback. They ran above average amount of plays every single week. So they're going to be fast-paced. They had a positive pass rate over expectation. So they're going to be pass heavy on top of that. And their defense stinks. So their game script's going to force them to pass on top of that. So it's like, green light, green light, green light, just offensive line, please hold up for them. Later, I guess if you're looking for a guy later in drafts, I like Rondale Moore, but just betting on rookies where, especially in managed leagues where if they don't hit, it's not a killer to your team. You can drop them, you can churn the wire, but he seems like a great fit for me in Arizona where they have this low ADOT, high pass attempt type role. He's going to get a lot of the short yardage targets. Really great yak ability. I think he can also get downfield too, make some big plays. And the competition there, I've been a big Christian Kirk fan, but it just, it hasn't happened. AJ Green was, 101st out of 112 in yards per out run last season. Hopkins is going to get his for sure, but I think there's opportunity for Rondale Moore there. I've been taking him a lot in like round 12 or so. So, not too much opportunity cost.
Rich, who are some guys later on that you like, and why should I stop loving Mike Williams? Because I can't stop drafting him.
Well, I'll get to Mike Williams in a second. That's an interesting point. But I think somebody that we haven't brought up that, I don't know if he's not certainly like a deep if but he's not been in a tier we've talked about yet, and I think he is going a little bit lower, is Devonta Smith with the Eagles. I just think that, if Jalen Hurts is at all real, and he's not going to be Undertaker, Anthony,
I
but
was
if Jalen
Hurts you mean the Undertaker
is at all real,
the dead
Jalen
man
Rager's out
Jalen
there.
Hurts.
Jalen Rager's out there. Greg Ward. I don't know. They obviously Dallas Goedert if they keep Zach Ertz, but I just think he just has some. He just has such a phenomenal skill set that I think he could be somebody that really you could get mid round or maybe even late round depending on the draft, and he could really surprise. I feel this year, so I'm pretty big on Devonta Smith. I had him at the end of my tier 4. But I think he could really potentially even move up out of that. And my tier 4 had a couple other guys that aren't sleepers, but I was curious on Mike's opinion of 2 before we go into like some deep sleeper talk. Tyler Lockett, we haven't talked about at all.
I meant to throw in my.
I hate Tyler Lockett this year personally, but I want your opinion, and then I'll give you why I dislike Mr. Lockett.
I like Lockett. I meant to throw him in 3B, honestly. I think last year, obviously, we had the let Russ cook movement to start the season for Seattle. They backed off it. But even when they backed off, they were decently pass happy. And, their new coordinator, they get Schottenheimer out of there, who's just historically just been a bad offensive coordinator. I think it gets Shane Waldron, who was the pass game coordinator for the Rams. It's a team that has had success in the air. We've seen what they've done with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, even with Jared Goff not having the most stellar quarterback play. And now Russell Wilson's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in NFL history, quite frankly. And I'm okay if they don't throw a whole ton. The fantasy points for Lockett, the target share for him, it was volatile, but it ended up pretty much even with DK Metcalf. Now, I certainly have DK Metcalf 2 rounds ahead. I'm taking Lockett and end of round 4. I'm taking DK Metcalf and end of round 2. But I like him. There's not any competition for him. It's him and Metcalf. That's it. I know they brought in Dwayne Eskridge as a rookie, who I don't mind at like the very end of best ball drafts, but he's not competing for Lockett in the second spot. So I'm pretty high on Lockett. But he's in that group where it's like, I'll take any of these guys. Kind of, I like them all.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned a point there that is why I dislike him. You kind of hinted at it. Even though his overall target share looked good, his overall targets looked good, his overall receptions looked good, he ate in week 7 for 15 catches, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He ate in week 3 for 9 catches, 100 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then he disappeared basically for the rest of the season until you got to week 17 where he had 12 for 90 and 2. So if you look at his overall output, there was an extremely high percentage of that happened in 3 weeks, and 1 didn't even matter because it was week 17. So that's for me. And he actually did that in 19 too. If you kind of look at 2019 as well, not quite as bad, but he kind of got a majority of his points in 4 weeks. And I personally don't like wide receivers from that perspective, where it's, maybe he'll win you those weeks, right? Because he's going to throw, the 15, 203, he might win you that week by himself. But then you're kind of struggling those other weeks and you're just expecting something, and he's going to, not put up a ton of points for you. So for me, he's in my tier 4 still, don't get me wrong, but that's a guy I probably pass on for somebody that maybe has a little bit higher floor. But also want your opinion on Adam Thielen before we go into some more deeper players.
Yeah, if we kept going, I probably would have tier 4 Julio, T. Higgins, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson. Tier 5, there's a lot of names. Brandon Ayuk, Claypool, Robbie Anderson, Odell Beckham probably would have been in there. I'm really torn on Thielen, where I feel like he definitely belongs in this tier 4, but my tiebreaker kind of always goes to T. Higgins. Give me the younger guy with a little bit more upside. We've got Adam Thielen. Rich, I think you've mentioned not wanting to draft guys necessarily on the wrong side of the H30 number. He's on the wrong side of that. A little concerned that he's very touchdown dependent, which just historically the type of TD rate he had last year, scoring 14 touchdowns in 15 games, is going to regress a little bit. At the same time, it is an offense that's just hyper concentrated. I mean, it's Dalvin, it's Thielen, it's Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson helps him be efficient. I don't think Thielen's going to be bad. I just don't think he's got the huge ceiling that some of these other guys have. So when T. Higgins is gone, like Julio and T are gone, I'm drafting Thielen. But it's this weird spot where it has to break a pretty specific way for me to end up drafting Thielen, because quite often he goes before T.
So that's an excellent point right now live. So this is the Underdog app. So this is actually my decision right now here at this pick. And but I was about to take Adam Thielen, so I was going to do that either way. I was just, I thought it was an excellent segue here to get his opinion, because T. Higgins, interestingly enough, and I didn't prime him at all for this, literally just went and I wanted T. Higgins, and Julio's also gone.
I would take
this
Thielen
draft.
here. I'm looking at the
Thielen
board.
for me is the player that I would probably take because we already talked about how I'm not going to. Obviously, Michael Thomas not going to draft right now. Brandon Ayuk I kind of like, and I just mentioned Devonta Smith, but I'm going to take a little bit of a floor guy feel here with Thielen, since I already have the young wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey on board, Joe Mixon. So I'm going to go with, in my opinion, at least a decently safe play here with Thielen. So
need some veteran leadership on that team.
Another reminder: download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code Cover1. Get yourself $25 free. So, well played.
Draft.
Real placement. You can be drafting with us right as we go. So a couple final things here. I had mentioned the name earlier, Mike. So I'm curious. People love Justin Herbert. People seem to like the offense. Everybody loves Keenan Allen. Why is Mike Williams wide receiver 51?
Yeah, wide receiver 51 is way too low.
By ADP. By right now,
Yeah.
ADP, he is going wide receiver 51.
I've got him in like a cluster, probably in the mid 40s. So, definitely have him before that. I think the tough thing with Mike Williams is just we've mentioned guys that we think can earn target shares. Even if Keenan Allen goes down, I don't know if he's earning a big target share in any situation. So, I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be efficient. I have started to sour on Herbert a little bit as far as, that's more of a fantasy QB thing where I've got Russ definitely ahead of him, and beginning of offseason maybe I didn't just because some of the stuff Herbert was really good at with the deep passing and the under pressure statistics are a little bit less stable year over year. Joe Burrow is kind of the exact opposite, where he was really good on intermediate throws and clean pocket and struggled in deep passing and under pressure. So more likely those things just due to randomness turn out well for him. And if they don't turn out as well as they did last year for Herbert, new coach, I don't know. I'm a little squeamish there, but I think Mike Williams is fine there. One of the guys I've been taking that I have to stand for, because I've been standing for a lot, though, is Debo Samuel. As much as I love Brandon Ayuk, he's the bigger swing, bigger ceiling, but Debo going 2 rounds later doesn't really make sense to me. I think he's the favorite to get more targets than Ayuk. There is less downfield ability, and it always sticks out to me. His yards per reception is really high for his absurdly high catch rate. He gets those shovel passes, which inflate his catch rate, but you'd think that his efficiency would dip because of that, because those just aren't big plays. But he's so good after the catch. And one of the statistics, my friend Pat Kaiir, who I do a lot of stuff with, he's at NBC Sports Edge. He looks at yards per out run a lot, and there's only 8 guys in the last 10 years who have 2+ yards per out run each of their first 2 seasons. It's guys like AJ Brown, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham. The list is loaded, and there's Debo Samuel on that list. So I like him as the cheapest of a Niners team. I think could lead the league in points if things break correctly.
Sneaky, I like it. Anthony, what names are sticking out for you later on that you see yourself liking?
Mike hit on a couple of them. I think the Arizona offense is very interesting, and I'm wondering who fills. Hop is going to get his, and we know what Kyler Murray is going to do. I'm intrigued about the backfield as well, but I'm interested to see who gets that after Hop target share option in that wide receiver offense. Some of the talk out of Arizona has been now that they have AJ Green, they can put him on the outside. They want to bump Christian Kirk inside to the slot where he's more ideally designed to be, which I think that is intriguing. And his speed, the deep threat option, he connected with Kyler Murray on a decent amount of deep balls last year. And much to Mike's point, I've liked Christian Kirk since he came out of college, but I really like Rondale Moore as well. So that's definitely a situation that I like and keeping my eye on. I also think the Denver situation is one. The quarterback play, obviously, is it Lock? Is it Teddy? What's going to happen? But if you're looking at it, what we let off with and have talked about throughout this episode, the talent aspect and the football aspect. I know Cortland Sutton is coming back from an injury, but a really good physical presence, a really strong wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy there as well. Tremendous route runner, tremendous hands, great understanding of the game and how to manipulate defensive backs and coverage. If you're looking at guys who, one of them is going to be the wide receiver 1, and they're going to get some sort of target share and volume. We just don't know how much or how efficiently they're going to get it. And then also in that regard, you're just looking at the talent. They're both very good at the game of football. And so that Denver situation is definitely one that I'm keeping an eye on. And, since we're kind of asking questions to Mike here, I do have one for Mike. If you're looking at, it could be middle tier guys going up or later tier guys jumping up. Is there someone who you feel confident in this year who could make a multi-tier jump? I think going into last year, Stephon Diggs, we'll just stick with him, was a guy who people were maybe undervaluing a little bit. And now this year, he's solidly in that tier 1 category. Do you see anybody, going from tier 3 to tier 1 or tier 4 to tier 2 or lower to mid, anything like that? Somebody who would make a significant tier jump this year who's maybe not being talked about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, I love the Denver take, especially for Judy. If we get Teddy, Judy caught less than 50% of his passes. This guy we know can get open. If it's Teddy who's more accurate, especially where Judy works in the short areas of the field, love that. As far as guys who can move up, I think if I'm making a really bold call, I think there's a chance we could have Jamar Chase going at the end at the 1-2 turn next year. Multi-tier jump up. This is a guy that. People who know prospects better than me, I kind of don't do my own prospecting. I have people that I trust, but they kind of tell me Jamar Chase. I think Blair Andrews of RotoViz wrote about him as being the best wide receiver prospect since Amari Cooper. And again, I already touted the Bengals offense, so I don't want to go over that again, but I think it's just a superb talent. And he played with Burrow in college. We've got the shower narrative there. So I'm in on Jamar Chase. I think he's there. Someone, and then guys that go in round 6, 7. I think 2 guys that aren't young guys, but I think are underrated veterans that maybe fit that Keenan Allen mold from last year. Odell Beckham and Robbie Anderson, where. As I love DJ Moore, but Robbie Anderson paced with him all the way last year and is going 3 rounds later. And it's super concentrated offense. He's played with Darnold. And as bad as Darnold was, he's terrible for the Jets, getting free of Adam Gase and getting in a much better system. Who knows? He's probably not going to do much worse than Teddy did last year. There wasn't much of explosiveness, which, by the way, tells us how bad Drew Lock is, where we're please get Teddy in Denver over Drew Lock. And then Sam Darnold might be an upgrade over Teddy in Carolina. And then Odell Beckham, I wrote about earlier this offseason, where I didn't expect to like him, kind of an older, not older guy, but not a young guy anymore, coming off of injury. But the Cleveland Browns changed their approach at the end of last season. They were very run heavy. They had a positive pass rate over expectation their last 6 weeks, and very high in the playoff game against Pittsburgh, where they just kept the gas pedal on even when they jumped out that early lead. So I think they're going to throw more than people think. And Baker's had a strange career arc so far, but number 1 overall pick, really highly touted prospect, awesome rookie year, gets into a more stable organization when they bring over Stefanski, and so if he takes a leap forward and they throw more, you have to bank on Odell's health, but we do have a history of him being an elite receiver. He's in that 2 yards per out run cohort. So I'll throw him there as usually it's younger guys that make that big tier, but Odell could be back in the round 4, 5 mix next year, and he's going more 6, 7 this year.
I want to ask Rich your thoughts on here, but I planted a seed that it's completely just a narrative thought, but that they're such an analytics heavy front office. I think they want to see a little more of what they have in Baker before they hand him $200 million. And I think that involves a little more passing. I don't think they flip from, they had the most heavy tight end sets, one of the most run heavy in the league, to all of a sudden, Bills, Chiefs, Packers, you're crazy pass heavy with the top end. But I think that they move the needle a little bit just to be able to see, hey, we're going to hand you, 9 digits worth of money. We want to make sure we know what we got. I think we see them push it a little bit more. Rich, you're around it all the time. What are you thinking we see coming into this year with that passing offense and the receivers who could benefit from it?
Yeah, I actually agree. I think, Mike touched on it, but consistency is huge, as we know in the NFL. And Stefanski is, a really smart coach. And no one really, I think people didn't give him enough credit in Minnesota, and he's come over and proven that he can do it on his own here in Cleveland. And when you have that, finally some stability for Baker, because he's had 0 in his short tenure with the Browns. second year in the system, I think is going to be big. And, Mike also brought up a really great point. If you look at just his passing attempts, middle of the season, it was very, very, small, 18, 28, 25, 20, 22. But I talked about this a few weeks ago. That was because of some really weird weather situations to Cleveland's schedule last year, where wind was weird down on the lake, like 3 games. It was Philly comes to mind, Houston comes to mind. So
the
Raiders
game was nuts. Yeah,
that alone is going to increase his pass attempts. And, he still threw 3,500 yards last year, which certainly isn't some crazy number, but he could have easily thrown for 4,000, I feel, last year. So I think he's going to throw for 4,000 yards this year, 4,000 to 4,200. So somebody's catching those passes, and it's going to, and as long as I think he got locked on to Odell a little bit too much early on because he wanted to appease Odell a little bit. And I think he's grown as a player. I don't think that's going to happen that much this year, but I think that's actually good for both Odell and Jarvis because Odell's not going to get balls that are much more catchable. Odell did not get a lot of catchable balls before he went down last year. So I think Odell and Jarvis are both going to be players that right now they're going. Jarvis Landry's going criminally low for somebody that I think would be a productive flex play with a high floor. And I think Odell, he looks great. He's not on the PUP list. Those are all positives. He's practicing, in training camp already, with no restrictions. They gave him the day off today, simply from hey, let's make sure we manage this rate standpoint. So. Yeah, I think there's going to be some fantasy points there for guys that are going much lower than they probably would have between Odell and Jarvis.
Based on ADP right now, Odell going beginning of the 7th round and Jarvis going in the 9th round. So definitely guys you can get later on to be able to add to that.
And I think Hoop too. And not that we're talking tight ends, we'll say this, but I think Hooper is going to be not worthless. He was worthless.
Not worthless.
He's going to be not worth. I'm going to go out on a limb. Not worthless. All right. Any other offenses that stick out to you, Anthony, that we haven't touched on? It's funny. The guys that always go through there, we have a handful of the one-trick pony offenses. The high end of that is your Allen Robinson. The mid area, you have your Kenny Galladay with the Giants. Then you get into, some of the ugly version with like Brandon Cooks with Houston. Mike, how do you approach ones where you're not sure about the offense, but you think there's a true lead dog that's maybe not in a great team setting, maybe some nice garbage time? How do you gauge that where there are a couple boxes checked, but not all of them?
Yeah, it's tough. I think Galladay's a good example of someone that I want to be in on, but I'm not, where I'm like trying to learn my lessons from last year with Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs. And people are like, Kenny Galladay's this year's Stephon Diggs, but he was consistently the clear wide receiver 1 in Detroit and did not earn high target shares. This is a low 20% target share guy. I don't even have him quite at 20%. And it's such a shift to like, with Allen and the Bills, there was some unknown, still with Allen takes the big leap. And some of that you can't foresee. Maybe Daniel Jones takes a leap, but not going to take a Josh Allen level leap. Like, that's pretty unprecedented. And you look at the coaching staff there. They're not going to – light bulb's not going to go off, and they're going to be a smart organization that throws
Jason
the ball.
Garrett doesn't even have the bulb. It's empty. Like, there's just an empty socket. An empty socket. There's
He's just turning the empty socket attached to the wall with, like, no bulb. And he's like, why isn't the light on?
And you go from playing with Matthew Stafford in a dome half the year to outside in the Northeast, and I just don't see it happening. I did a projections preview of the NFC East with Ben Gretsch on my podcast, Establish the Edge, and like I would not be shocked. I said on this, I think it might even be closer to 50-50 than people think that Sterling Shepard out targets Kenny Galladay. Now, Kenny Galladay clearly better. Like, his targets are worth a lot more. They're down the field. He can make big plays. Like, he's very talented at what he does, but I think he's going where he should. He shouldn't be going earlier. I don't see him as the huge breakout guy. Whereas someone like Allen Robinson, where it's the one-trick pony, I feel better about that because we just know Allen Robinson's super good. He can handle a ton of targets.
He's produced with crappy teams and crappy quarterbacks before.
Yeah, what if Justin Fields is really good? Justin Fields probably going to start sooner rather than later. Like, what if he's really good? So I feel better about, that type of situation. Obviously, it's reflected in their cost a little bit, but even at Robinson's higher cost, I feel better about him having chances of really beating that ADP than I do Galladay.
And just to stick on the Bears real quick, from a sleeper standpoint, I really like Darnell Mooney for the fact that he's a number 2 in Chicago. Again, maybe not, depending on how long your draft is, but either late round pick or keep him, waiver wire. Like, hey, I'm going to be looking at him right away, especially when to Mike's point right there, if Justin Fields gets that call sooner than later, because I think Justin Fields is a really talented quarterback that's going to, he'll have his rookie bump. So don't get me wrong, but Darnell Mooney, I think, is somebody that could get some target share this year and be productive.
I think we could fill a highlight reel of Darnell Mooney open deep with balls sailing over his head last season.
Yeah.
And statistically, it's so hard. Like I'm doing a lot of stuff based on their baselines historically and like regressing that. Like with someone like Mooney's tough though, because it did seem like he got open down the field and just whether it was Foles or Mitch, they couldn't get him the ball,
I read something interesting today, Greg, real quick. I know you guys, Bills fans, you love to talk about the Jets. They're a favorite team of yours.
Love them.
But Jets.
Get out of here, Rich.
But Elijah Moore, I want opinions from a deep sleeper standpoint. I've read some really interesting things about Elijah Moore. Some folks think he, could pole vault to the top of that, from a target share perspective at some point this year.
He's been having a great
Davis,
camp.
Jameson Crowder, Keelan Cole are ahead of him-ish, kind of maybe right now. But curious, I guess, Mike's opinion on Elijah Moore, or obviously Greg or Anthony, either of your opinions as well.
So I'll throw out a couple things real quick. I try to be even-handed with it. I like making fun of the Jets, and I do a lot. And I don't love Zach Wilson, but I've loved a lot of their drafts. Like I love Quinnen Williams. I like Mekhi Becton. I really liked Elijah Vera Tucker this year. I wasn't happy about that. I loved Elijah Moore this year in the draft, and it was totally braced for the Bills to take him maybe at 30 when they could have had a chance. So I don't believe in Zach Wilson, so I'm a little bit nervous. They paid a bunch of money to Corey Davis. There's other mouths there, but there's certainly a drumbeat of how awesome he looks. So, Mike, I was actually going to ask about how do you mine through iffy to bad offenses when you think there's talent? We haven't talked about Las Vegas. We haven't talked about the Jets, New England, those iffy offenses. How do you maybe sift through that? And Elijah Moore is a good example.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, right off the bat, the good thing for the Jets is, they're going to just be more aggressive overall. They ran so few plays. They were so slow paced with Adam Gase. And even though they were constantly in a terribly negative game script, they still didn't throw the ball that frequently. So I think there's from a fantasy perspective, there's just some positive things right off the bat where it's going to be a more fantasy friendly offense just because there's nowhere to go but up with the switch there. And then I struggle with the Zach Wilson thing too, where, based on the stuff I'm looking at, Zach Wilson's definitely probably fourth among the quarterbacks, not second in the rookie class.
Yep.
But at the same time, Bills fans, we already joked about the Josh Allen receipts. There's some Justin Herbert receipts out there for people. I'm trying not to be too overconfident in my analysis of whether the guy's good or not. An organization took him as the number 2 overall pick. They telegraphed it. They were confident in it. He's, does have the athletic traits that you want. So I try to like I'm not super optimistic there, but I try to tailor that. And then I don't want it to overly impact how I feel about Elijah Moore, who I'm excited about. He was a really good prospect. And, early returns sound good. They're going to use him basically all over the field. Sounds like he can do a little bit of everything. And you just reach a point in your drafts, especially if you're in managed leagues. Same thing with Rondale Moore, where someone like Russell Gage, he'll give you X amount of points per game, but in a league where you have to pick who to start and you're really trying to win the league, that's a replaceable thing you can find on the wire. I want to take shots on guys that I'm going to know when I have to start them because they just break out in such a big way. Mm-hmm. So you really default to the uncertainty of things. Uncertainty is a good thing at certain points in the draft because we might have a lot of downside, but we can cut guys because the opportunity cost is so low and we've got a lot of upside. So I do like Elijah Moore.
So, Anthony, the question everyone wants to know is, who is your favorite Detroit Lions wide receiver?
None of them? Like TJ Hawkinson? I guess, or DeAndre Swift after. It's such a... I don't want to, be
What's our
negative
cartoon, Tom?
Oh, that's a terrible cartoon.
for the Lions receivers.
It's just like if you can't, no disrespect to Jared Goff, right? But I think Stafford was a much better QB than, Goff, and that offense still couldn't get it kicking with Galladay and Marvin Jones. And now you're sitting there with a lesser tiered quarterback in Jared Goff in a new coaching system. A team that always seems to be cursed. I am staying away from this offense completely. Even Hawkinson, I know as a tight end, I like him. I would take him if the value was there, but I'm not buying into the DeAndre Swift hype. I like Jamal Williams more than I do DeAndre Swift because of the late round aspect of it, but I don't want any parts of Detroit whatsoever. No, thank you for anybody.
So, Rich, an uncomfortable question for you. Who's your favorite Ravens receiver?
Oh, if you noticed, I haven't talked about any Steelers or Ravens.
No, you've handled it really well.
And I actually didn't draft Deontay Johnson right there in the underdog draft because F the Steelers.
I love it.
But favorite Ravens receiver. Well, they don't have a quarterback; they have a running back playing quarterback, so I don't really like any of them. No, I don't know. Mark Andrews.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm similar.
Who I did just take actually.
My Elijah Moore situation. I loved Rashad Bateman. He's really so liked good. Everything. And the guys I trust in scouting love Rashad Bateman. And then he got drafted by Baltimore. And I'm like, oh, cool. I don't know what to do with that now. I don't. How do you manage offenses like that?
Well, it's tough. They're such an outlier in terms of how much they're going to throw the ball. Like, you really need them to kind of have the season they had 2 years ago where they're just putting up a lot of points and guys can get there. I do. The one plus in Rashad Bateman's, to his credit or to his chances of breaking out, when rookie wide receivers break out in a big way, a lot of the times it's not because they're acquiring huge volume out of the gate. They're getting there on efficiency. And, there's a chance that they change this offense a little bit and he can get there on efficiency because he was someone the analytics community absolutely loved as a prospect. And then, one of the most analytics friendly teams takes him, which kind of reaffirms okay, this guy is hopefully a pretty good prospect. Had an awesome target share in college. So, but I don't know. I've been taking Elijah Moore and Rondale more than him just because I like situations kind of where it's like you kind of have to be right once, not twice. And with Bateman, I feel like you have to be right twice. First, he's got to pass Sammy Watkins. He's got to get on the field. And then even if he gets on the field, we need things to break right again because the team's not going to throw that much. Not having that many opportunities. So I'm not totally out on him, but it's tough sledding. I think, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore have more direct paths to hitting their upside.
That's a really good way to put it. They have to win twice or get it right twice type of thing, like beating out the other players and then also getting a target share. That's a really good way to put it. I like that.
Yeah.
So we've gone around a lot of topics tonight. We've gone through tiers. We've gone through some of our favorites here. Sleepers, some deeper sleepers, some of the ugly offenses, some of the one-trick pony offenses. Maybe just go around the horn here. One guy that you seem to really zero in on. Obviously it's easy at the top end. I love Stephon Diggs this year. You guys won't believe it. But who's a name that really sticks out to you that over and over again you see yourself going with? I'll kick it off just to kind of give an example of it, and I will use Mike Williams in that I over and over again I like him so much more than where he's going. I have to stop myself from drafting him 2 or 3 rounds ahead of where he goes, and I wait, and then he's still there, and I wait again, and then he's still there, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to take him now. And that he's just someone I can't get out of my head, and that I apparently like him way more than where the average ranks are. Are there any guys that stick out for you like that? We'll start with you, Anthony. Guys, that someone you really like that you see yourself really targeting in leagues that you care about.
I like how you phrase that, in leagues that I care about. In leagues I don't care about, I'm targeting Tebow. Someone towards the top end who I'm really targeting, Terry McLaurin. I've spoken a lot about loving the hell out of him. I think he can make a solidified jump into the top end of tier 2 from this year. And then towards the lower end, we've talked about a couple of them. I like Odell Beckham. I just think from a volume standpoint and just overall talent, granted he has to stay healthy, but he's so tremendously talented, and Baker is better than a lot of people want to give him credit for. And then I love what Rich and Mike mentioned about the weather aspects last year, in addition to potentially kicking things up a notch in terms of passing, what they did towards the back end of the year in the regular season and in the playoffs. And Mike hit on one as well. Robbie Anderson. I've had a lot of DJ Moore shares over the last several years in Carolina. And, I hear myself twice. This is fun. And I like it, man. I sound great. I've been called the songbird of my generation. So, I mean, it is what it is. More joy for everyone. But I like Robbie Anderson. I watched a lot of Panthers games last year as a DJ Moore owner and wanted to constantly punch through the TV because I think DJ Moore is fantastic and I wanted him to get the ball more, and he just wouldn't get the ball more. But then you also couldn't really hate on it because Robbie Anderson was doing really well. And Mike mentioned his connection with Darnold. He also has a connection with the coaching staff, and they used him a lot out of the gate. You add that speed aspect and a new QB. I really like Robbie Anderson, especially relative to his ADP. I know that's the big one as well. So those are kind of three guys, two towards the back end, and then Scary Terry at the beginning.
Rich, who are your wide receiver crushes for this year?
Yeah, I mean, to start with some of the top guys, again, I'm trying to get on that upswing, right, of the youthful wideouts. So the DK Jefferson, Lamb, I really want one of those. They make me feel good. If I have them on my team, I feel good. From a lower guy, similar to your Mike Williams, and I don't know why. And Wentz just went down with a foot injury, which is a little scary. So we got to check into that. But I just think that Michael Pittman has a shot in Indy, similar to kind of your feeling on Mike Williams, I feel. So later on in drafts, or again, maybe that's, depending on how long the draft is, how many rounds, maybe it's, keep an eye on it waiver wire wise. But I don't know. I just think Michael Pittman has a really nice opportunity potentially in Indy if Wentz can stay healthy. Because he had some nice showings at the end of last year. He showed some nice things, and Ty is long in the tooth. They don't have a lot else there, in my opinion. I mean, they have Paris Campbell, but so Pittman's somebody late for me that I tend to lean towards, which could be wrong, but I like his name.
I like it. Mike, take us home here. Who are some of the names you see yourself being drawn to as you do your mini drafts?
Pulling up my underdog exposures here. If people keep handing me third round AJ Brown, I'm going to keep taking it. I think there's been a little overreaction to people just concerned about the volume with Julio there. And then really clusters of guys, but so maybe that's a cop out, but the Bengals receivers and the Cowboys receivers, those are the two offenses. I love all the receivers at the various points in the draft. You can get Gallup and Boyd late as the third. You can take Lamb and Cooper at the 3-4 turn, and anywhere in rounds 4-5, taking T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Those are probably my primary targets. If I'm in one league and I'm really want to get my guys, those are it.
All right. So, obviously, make sure you guys are checking out. I am a happy premium member of Establish the Run and love using their work over there. Make sure you're checking out at 2hats1mike on Twitter. Mike, where can people find more of your work? Obviously, your title sounds very fancy. What are the things that they can actually go see if they dive in on the site at Establish the Run from you?
Yeah, I always feel like my title sounds way too fancy for what it should be.
It's super fancy.
Yeah, I'm more like the guy in a jersey here spouting off takes versus the director of analytics. But at ETR you can find, I power all our rankings and stuff. I power the projections behind the rankings, working in conjunction with Adam Levitan and Evan Silva, getting their thoughts. It's a really good mix of, we got Evan's football takes, and then I'm running the numbers, and then Adam's very good at just kind of having that natural intuition of stuff. So you can find our ranks there. If you're playing on underdog, I have a lot of content as far as the best way to play that. That's best ball, which is, at first you might think it's similar to just your regular redraft league, but there are a lot of nuances that are pretty different. So I have a lot of articles up there. And then also I have my podcast, Establish the Edge podcast. You can check that out on iTunes.
Awesome. I appreciate your time tonight. This has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate everything. Make sure you guys are checking that out. Rich, anything for the people before we sign out?
I didn't say it earlier, but I was drinking a little Angel Envy tonight, so I hope everyone was enjoying a cocktail with us this evening. But find me on Burn River Sports on the Twitter. I like to talk about football, any sport really. I got my MLS Columbus Crew Championship shirt on because I'm also a European football fan, and the Gold Cup final is Sunday, USA versus Mexico. So Zardes scored the winning goal, a Crew player against Qatar yesterday, I believe, to send us to the final. So other than that, hope everyone has a joyous weekend.
Wonderful. Anthony, what can the good people find from you?
I didn't mention it, but I am drinking Smart Water. It's got electrolytes and it hydrates me. You can find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. I am obviously a co-host here on the Cover One Fantasy Football Show, and then host of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network, and find that live every Thursday night, and find it on YouTube, any and every podcasting platform possible, and just excited now. I feel like football is, once training camp hits, I feel like that's officially football season. We are in the thick of it. We're about to be in August. Fantasy football drafts are kicking up. Real football stuff is kicking up. We're about to get preseason football. And before we know it, we'll be in the teeth of the regular season, yelling at the TV because of fantasy or because of real NFL games that matter. And I'm excited to be upset and want to punch my TV.
Myself as well. Yeah, you guys can find my work over at Cover One Buffalo Podcast on Twitter at Greg Tompsett, and we're gonna go through and make sure that we resend out a lot of our shows here. It's really evergreen content for right now, getting ready for draft time. You can go in, listen to our draft strategy show, listen to our quarterback tiers, our running back tiers, now wide receiver. We'll obviously do one more with all the rest of the remaining positions and approaches. So make sure you check those out. It's still fully valid content all the way up through draft time to get you ready for everything that's going on. And with our show being new, make sure you give us a like, a rating, a review. It really helps a lot. We're going to be doing a lot of drafts coming up here, and we're going to have a contest for people who give us a rating on iTunes or on Google Podcasts that we're going to be inviting you into some of our private drafts to be able to draft with us. So a couple fun things going on coming up here, but make sure you check us out. On behalf of the guys, we've had a lot of fun tonight, but this has been Cover One Fantasy, and we are out.